Hello, everybody. This is the class video for technical writing Tuesday, December 6th. So today I'm going to talk about the first drafts of the system improvement proposal. I graded every draft that came in as of yesterday morning. So if anybody has submitted a draft after noon yesterday, Monday, then I still need to get to it. But all of the ones, including the ones that were submitted late, I graded and I made extensive comments on everybody's draft. So I wanted to talk about the drafts in general terms today, about some of the patterns that I saw with them. Generally, I'm pleased with the progress that people have made on them. I think that a lot of people have some really good and interesting topics. And I can see that quite a few of you have done some significant work on the proposal up until now. There are also, there's unevenness, which is to be expected because everybody does these final projects at a different rate. Some people tend to wait more to the last minute to get things done, which is not recommended with a project like this because it is so high stakes. But I wanted to talk about just some general patterns that I saw in the drafts to help everybody to understand why you got the grade that you did. And so to clear up some of the mysteries and possibly some tensions that might come. First of all, out of all of the drafts, the average score was between 75 and 80. So there was really only one student who got 100 out of the whole class. And I actually wasn't surprised by that. And I don't think anybody should be panicked by that. And I'm going to talk about that when we get towards the end of the comments and remarks. But my first, comment is, if you were one of the people that got one of those scores within that average range, don't panic. That's actually normal. And it doesn't mean that you won't get an A on the final project if you pay close attention to the comments and if you do well on the final draft. So basically, what I asked for in the first draft was a minimum of 2 pages of writing, including the outline of the proposal. And I wanted the 2 pages of writing to at least begin to conform with that template. Now, some people lost points by not organizing the writing that they did produce to in any way conform with that template. Now, I understand that it's an early stage of development, but there were some people who lost points because it seemed as if what they did was they just kind of jammed the writing that they had done under the topic headings without any real relationship between that topic heading and the writing underneath them. And that's not what we need in a first draft. It's not really going to help you. It's not going to help you make progress towards your paper. And the other thing, there were people who lost points, significant points, by veering from their original topic proposal and or taking it in a direction where it's not going to work. So in other words, there was something that happened between the topic proposal that you submitted and the draft that you submitted, where the draft is coming off quite a bit different from the direction that you set in the topic proposal. And in some cases, not in every case, but in some cases, that's a direction that's not going to work. So there were people, if you are in the category of less than 60%, there's probably one of those systemic problems with your topic. So really pay attention to the feedback. Everybody should carefully read the feedback, especially read the feedback before emailing me to ask why you got the score that you did, because otherwise I'm just going to have to repeat exactly what I said in the feedback. But for people who got less than 60%, It is in most cases because the topic proposal is considerably different from what it is that you submitted, or you submitted something and went off in a direction that's going to be problematic. And I pointed out in every case what the problem was. To the best of my ability, so if anything was unclear, I'm happy to clarify it, but all I ask is that you please carefully read the comments first before emailing me, and then we can have a more productive discussion. But I'm happy to answer any questions by email. So what I saw in some cases was an unfocused solution. And at this point, because the final draft is due December 19th, we've only got a couple of weeks now. You really need to be focused at this point at what your solution is. So once again, go back and read the assignment sheet, and you will see this topic proposal cannot be a list of tips. It cannot be a list of possible suggestions to make things better. Here's something we can try. Here's another thing we can try. And here's a third thing that might possibly work. It's not a list of, unfocused fixes to the problem. You need to actually propose a solution to the problem. So you need to do some creative work to actually leverage a solution to the problem that you're describing, and not just talk about, well, maybe it could be this, maybe it could be that, maybe it could be that, right? Because that isn't really doing the job of this proposal. If you don't understand what that means, I'm happy to answer the question by email. Okay, but there were a number of people who lost points because of the lack of focus and clarity as far as the solution that they're proposing. Now, I don't expect you to have all the research or all the details for that solution at this point, but I do expect people to have an idea of it, a concept of it that you can explain, right? Some people lost points because what they proposed as a solution was the simple promotion of an existing fix that just came off as an advertisement or marketing for a product. And that's not what this is about. That's not what this paper is for. So in other words, if you are, for example, proposing, if you're proposing a solution to, a software problem, just identifying a software patch that's on the market already for that problem, that's not what this proposal is about. That's not what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to be more creative than that. Okay, so it's important that you understand, that everybody understands that it's not a marketing pitch. And the idea that you propose has to actually match with the problem that you're describing, right? Which is the reason for that template, right? So the template starts with a statement of need, and then after that comes the description of your solution. And following that template is not optional. So some people lost significant points because they didn't make an attempt to follow that template. So in other words, they submitted the outline. So it's 20 points to submit the outline, but then they submitted a first draft that had a completely different system of organization. That's not going to work. The template is not optional. So that's like, please look at the models in the folder. I'm going to point them all out at the end of this, but look at the model papers that got A's in the past. There are 2 model papers, and really study them. There's a reason that they got A's. They followed that template structure really well. That was one of the reasons that they got A's. So it's the template's not optional. It's not just a suggestion. It's actually, that's the way your paper needs to be. Some of the problems, I'm going to list the problems that resulted in a less problematic loss of points. So most people lost around 20 points. So here are some of the problems that caused like a 20 to 30 point loss in points. For example, the statement of need should only talk about the problem. The statement of need is not the place to introduce your solution. The statement of need is where you discuss the problem. It shouldn't even mention your solution. You shouldn't even have the first discussion of your solution under the statement of need. So it goes abstract, and the abstract is the last thing you should write. So everybody who tried writing a beautiful introduction and putting it under the heading abstract, you're going to need to rewrite that all over again. And I basically said that to everyone, that do not write the abstract first. So that was wasted work. I'm sorry, but if you haven't written the paper yet, you can't summarize the paper. So the abstract is not an introduction to your paper. The abstract should literally just be blank at this point. So those of you who didn't put anything under abstract, that's great. That represents good planning, good execution, good thinking, right? The abstract is not an introduction. The abstract is a short summation of your whole paper, and you cannot write it until your paper is done, okay? So so after the abstract comes the statement of need, and that is not time to talk about your idea. That's not the time to talk about your solution. It's the time to talk about the problem. Most of your sources and citations are going to be under that statement of need. That's where you really need to do your research. That's where you need to do your academic source citations. That's where you need to go to the library to find information about your problem. And that is where you're going to need to, match your solution to the aspects of that problem that you focus on, okay? So some people lost points because they wrote statement of need and then immediately started pitching their solution. And you can't really, it's putting the cart before the horse. No, so yeah, statement of need only talks about the problem. Some people lost some points because of tone problems. The tone of this paper is academic and as objective as possible. So it's not a persuasive paper. The goal is not to persuade your reader about how terrible the problem is that you're trying to solve. Do that with facts, do that with numbers and statistics. Document the scope of the problem with numbers and statistics that you get from your online research that you do through the library, right? So give us the scope of the problem objectively, and think objective, think scientific, think clear, but it's not emotional. It's not, you got to take the emotion out of it. So not everybody did this, but a few people and it's kind of something that people do when they don't have the facts yet, when they haven't gotten the research together yet. You're sort of filling in the gaps with, this is a terrible problem and everybody's really upset about it. That's not going to work in this paper. You need to actually present statistics, actual real numbers. Now, some people already had some excellent charts and graphs. That I love, because, you're already starting with a factual basis to describe the problem. The only thing is that some people lost points, not a lot of points, but maybe like 10, points for just putting in a chart and a graph and then not referring to it, right? So even if you don't have a full discussion written up yet, you got to you can't just put in a chart and a graph documenting numbers, describing the scope of the problem without referring to it in your text. You need to use those charts and graphs as a discussion tool. I think some people are afraid that it might be repetitive. It's not repetitive. It's actually the way it's done. It's not repetitive to restate the figures in a chart and a graph in paragraph form under the chart and the graph. That's what you need to do, right? So think about charts and graphs. That's your friend. So when I'm saying your statement of need should be about 3 pages long, if anybody's panicking about how you're going to fill up 3 pages of text describing your problem, get yourself some charts and graphs and explain them in paragraphs, and you will see before you know it, you've got at least 3 pages describing your problem. So that's why it needs to be that long, so I think, some people get panicked about how do I fill up the pages. It's actually not that difficult if you actually take your time and document the numbers and discuss them. The pages fill themselves, basically. So just a few tips, because I know this is getting long. At this point, I already mentioned nobody should have the abstract written yet. ask yourself, especially for people who are proposing, some people are proposing systemic improvements to a system in New York City, whether that's transportation or waste collection, waste management, the water system. Ask yourself if the solution that you're proposing is in use in another country or in another city or in another state. And if it is, feel free to use that research as part of your the proposal for your solution. So in other words, your technical description and application of the technical description, it's not plagiarism and it's not considered cheating to say, for example, I'm proposing a system to improve the electrical grid that's similar to what they do in Singapore. For example, in Singapore, their electrical grid works like this. And then the way that I would apply that to New York City is this, right? That's not cheating, that's fine. So if people are like, worried about how they're going to describe their system improvement proposal, it could really help if you first do a little check and see if it's in use somewhere else. And if it is, you can at least in part model your solution after what's being done somewhere else. Okay, so that's a tip for everybody. If it applies to your topic. The other tip is get help from the City Tech Library. And at this point, I'm going to go into screen sharing for a little bit just to remind everybody of how easy that is. So going into screen sharing mode. From the opening web page of the City Tech Library or the City Tech web page, go to Academics, select Library. You don't even have to go to the library, although it's kind of nice to actually have a human interaction with a librarian. But if you're not anywhere near, from the library web page, your one search, it's set up so nicely. I love how easy it is compared to other CUNY library web pages. Is so easy. So your one search is the first thing that you see, and you can put your keywords, your topic here. It'll take you to the databases, lists of sources. If you don't have the luck that you're looking for there, you can go to Ask a Librarian. All you have to do is put your name, right, your contact information in there, your email address, start chat. You click on this and you get a real live person chatting with you that you can ask, how do I find information on Singapore's electrical grid, right? Or whatever it is that you need to find, and they will help you. It's their job. Your student services fee pays for this. So everybody, I would really like you to do this. I'm going to stop share. Please use the library before you use Google. I know that everybody is very, very used to using Google, but there were a couple, and most people know better at this point, but there are some people who I had to say, this source isn't going to work because it's a commercial source. So if you are proposing, for example, solar panels on, subway stations, to save heating costs, it's not going to work to cite a solar panel installation company's website. I'm not going to accept that as a source. You need to have non-commercial sources that are not trying to sell you anything, sources that are not describing a product for sale, right? Sources that are academic or else from fact-checked journalistic publications, things like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Guardian, you can't use commercial sources. If the website sells a product, can't use it. So just, and the problem with Google is that it gets progressively worse year after year after year. Google's search results are increasingly more and more and more commercial. More like, the first 2 pages of a Google search result, you're going to have to weed through page after page, hit after hit of a commercial site that's trying to sell you something. So please use the City Tech Library and get comfortable with that, because for an assignment like this, Google is not your friend. It's really not. So that's my big pitch on that. Finally, don't panic about your score. Don't panic, but do take it seriously. What I'm telling everybody at this point is that the final draft, doing well on the final draft, gives you the opportunity to recoup points on the first draft. So in other words, I will forgive point loss on the first draft if I see substantial improvement on the final draft, right? So even if you got, 50% or less on the first draft, you can still get an A in this assignment if you take that feedback seriously and correct those problems in your revised final draft, okay? So I'm telling everybody that that's my, what I'm offering to everybody at this point. So that's it. So I hope that answers a lot of people's questions. The final draft, once again, is December 19th. That's when it's due. I'm happy to answer anybody's questions by email between now and then, but please read the feedback first. And good luck, everybody. Thank you, and we will see you all next week.